Okay, so the Eagles just got some huge news today as they officially have their next offensive coordinator, and the Birds' decision has a lot of fans worried. So, is there actually a reason for concern, or could this turn out to be a good hire after all? Also, with the NFL offseason officially in full swing, the Eagles just got word of some interesting news that could completely change their offseason plans. As despite having free agency to worry about and several extensions looming, it still seems like the Eagles could have a shot at landing one of the NFL's biggest stars through a trade because of a recent development. So, let's break it all down. Meanwhile, the Birds just officially lost a couple of key coaches to Kellen Moore and the Saints, while Nick Sirianni is due a big payday, and the Jalen Hurts disrespect is just about as ridiculous as it's ever been. So we're going to talk about that and all the other latest Eagles news starting right now. What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Philly Fan 21 channel. If you're new, I'm Evan and I cover all things Philadelphia Eagles. And let's jump right into this with some breaking news from yesterday, as just after I uploaded my last video, which was largely focused on Kellen Moore and the Saints trying to hire away some of the Eagles coaches, what we all feared but also expected actually happened, as the Saints officially named now former Eagles QB coach Doug Nussmeier as their offensive coordinator. And again, this was expected, as Coach Nuss has been with Kellen Moore every step of the way during his coaching career with Dallas, LA, and Philly. And he also has strong ties to New Orleans, so it only makes sense that he would once again follow Moore, especially since this time, that came with a promotion to offensive coordinator. So, while it does suck that Jalen Hurts is now going to have yet another quarterback coach, I wish Coach Nuss nothing but the best for helping Hurts and the Birds win a Super Bowl championship. And in addition to losing him, the Birds also lost another coach to the Saints on Tuesday, which I actually missed when I was making my last video, as Kellen Moore in New Orleans also hired Eagles run game specialist and assistant offensive line coach TJ Paganetti. And this is a notable loss as well because Paganetti has spent 10 seasons with the Eagles, first joining back in 2013 with Chip Kelly, and he has served in many different roles, and since he returned in 2017, he has specifically been Jeff Stoutland's right-hand man in coaching the offensive line and helping coordinate the run game. Plus, he also was a big part of the Eagles' pre-draft process last year. Now, in the short term, I'm not too concerned about the impact that losing Paganetti will have on the Eagles' run game or the offensive line, just because as long as Jeff Stoutland is still around, I'm confident that that'll still be top-notch. However, I do feel like there is a strong chance that Paganetti, who is still just 35 years old, would have been a prime candidate to replace Stout whenever the legend does decide to retire, which hopefully isn't for a very long time. So again, this is definitely a notable loss, and the Eagles are going to have to find someone else to be Stout's right-hand man and possible successor. But now, moving on to some other news from yesterday, the Birds made a rather interesting roster move along the offensive line as they released backup center Nick Gates. So this definitely isn't a huge move by any means, as Gates obviously didn't play much of a role at all this past season and his contract was set to expire this offseason anyways. But on the other hand, he was a solid depth piece on the interior of the offensive line, and he's a veteran with a good amount of playing experience, so this is definitely a somewhat notable move. I do think it is a bit interesting that they didn't just let his contract expire, but regardless, Gates is no longer on the team, and he leaves Philadelphia a Super Bowl champion, so shout out to him, best of luck to wherever he goes next, and who knows, maybe he finds himself back in Philadelphia at some point, because we've seen that happen before. Now, in addition to those pieces of news though, yesterday also marked a pretty significant day early in the NFL offseason, as it was the first day where teams could apply the franchise tag to one of their pending free agents, with the window specifically being open from February 18th to March 4th. Now for the Eagles, I'm not expecting them to franchise tag anybody, nor should you, because not only have they not used their franchise tag since all the way back in 2012, but they also don't really have any free agents whose market value lines up with the amount that they would make if they were tagged. So let me explain that. So the value of a franchise tag is based off of the top 5 salaries at that given position, and when you look at the chart here, you can see that a projected franchise tag for a linebacker, for example, is around $27 million, meaning if the Eagles were to tag Zack Baun, that's the amount that he would get paid, which obviously that is way too much. And that's also the case for all the Eagles' other key free agents, as offensive line would make about $25 million under the tag, which is way too much for Mekhi Becton, and defensive tackles would make over $23 million, which is too much for Milton Williams. Plus, if you're wondering about Josh Sweat, there's no differentiation between edge rushers and inside linebackers under the current CBA, meaning that if the Eagles were to tag Sweat, it would be for that $27 million that I mentioned earlier, which again is obviously too much. And that also would explain why the price to franchise tag Zack Baun is super inflated above even the highest paid inside linebacker in the league, which is Roquan Smith at $20 million. So yeah, again, it's pretty safe to say that the Eagles aren't going to use that franchise tag on anybody. However, something they could take advantage of, as they always do, is the expected increase in salary cap space, which this offseason specifically, the cap is expected to go up $22 to $26 million, giving the Eagles more room to bring guys back and sign guys in free agency. However, it's the massive increase that's expected in a few years that could really change things. As yesterday, Brett Coleman put out a tweet highlighting that the NFL salary cap could explode in the near future, basically just due to the fact that starting this year, they're changing the way they measure viewership and ratings, which is expected to reveal more accurate and even higher numbers, and in turn, that'll lead to more expensive broadcasting rights negotiations in 2028-2029, and ultimately a much higher salary cap. And he finished off the tweet by saying, quote, "If I'm a GM, that means next year or maybe even this year, I can sign some truly outrageously backloaded deals with a ton of funny money that all slams home in 2030 and not even care about the math." So that's certainly very, very interesting, especially since we know that the Eagles, Jeffrey Lurie, and Howie Roseman are the absolute kings of paying guys big money while softening the salary cap low by backloading the contracts. I mean, Coleman even acknowledged that and used the heavily backloaded Jalen Hurts contract as support for his claim, citing that Jeffrey Lurie has a background in film and TV and knows that the salary cap is going to boom when the league renegotiates broadcasting rights. Now look, I know that's a lot of information, but basically what that means is that we should expect to see a massive increase in the salary cap around 2028, 2029, and 2030. And that just means more opportunities for Howie Roseman to not only extend more key players to big backloaded contracts, but to possibly also go out and bring in other quality players on big contracts as well. And look, I am far from a salary cap genius, and I definitely don't even know close to the ins and outs of everything, so I'm just a fan right now speculating on what could possibly happen in the future. But with the whole Myles Garrett trade request situation going on right now, you have to wonder if the future explosion in salary cap could affect the Eagles' chances of bringing him in via trade this offseason. I mean, Coleman himself said it here. He seems to think that it's a possibility that the Eagles could land Myles Garrett in a trade, so I think that's definitely worth noting, and obviously, assuming the numbers work out, Garrett seems like a perfect fit in Philly, with them possibly in need of an edge rusher this offseason, and with Garrett expressing multiple times that he'd love the opportunity to play for the Eagles. Plus, the Eagles also have the second highest odds to land Garrett this offseason. Now obviously, to get this deal done, the Birds would need to fork over some serious draft compensation, but if we know anything about Howie Roseman, it's that he's always in on everything, and he's terrified of missing out on making the big deal. And this clip from the Kelsey Brothers New Heights podcast back in 2023 only gives us further reason to believe that a Myles Garrett trade to Philly could be possible.
I think the one thing that I'm not sure it's a good trade, but I do have one quality that I can't deny, and that is I am relentless. I am so scared. I think like part of what you have, and I think I have, is there's an insecurity that you're not going to be great, right?
Yeah.
It's not like you feel like, all right, we won a Super Bowl. Oh, everything's great. Like, I'm great. My legacy's set. It's the opposite, I feel like. And I'm so worried that someone's going to be available that I don't know about. And I see a trade or a move made, and I didn't know about it.
And you could have had it.
I would have done it.
Yeah.
And so for me, that drives me. So what do you try to do? You just like, the information part of this is like talking to these guys, these GMs, and just like, I'm open to anything, like we're looking for these positions, but I'm open to anything. And honestly, like, I know it's going to cost a lot, but don't be afraid to ask me, because I may do it, And I think the more you can do that, the more opportunities come about. And I really do it because I'm petrified of waking up one morning and seeing A.J. Brown traded to, you pick the team, I don't want to pick the team. And I would have done that trade.
Sure.
And then how do I explain that? I think that's part of it, is making sure like I am trying to speak to every single guy and saying like, don't throw out an idea. Throw in an idea. Tell me what you do. Like, this is what we're looking for. And I think the only thing that helps with is you just kind of have options.
Okay.
You also get laughed at a lot.
I'm definitely curious to know all your guys' thoughts on this. I mean, what do you think of all this salary cap craziness, and do you think a Myles Garrett trade to Philadelphia could actually be possible? I mean, personally, even with the cap expected to go up, I feel like the Eagles are just going to opt to bring in a cheaper free agent edge rusher rather than trading significant draft capital for Myles Garrett and then also paying him a massive extension, especially since the Eagles have to extend their own players in the future. But again, you can't rule anything out with Howie Roseman. But now, moving on, one guy that is due a big extension and will undeniably get it this offseason is head coach Nick Sirianni. As with him heading into the last year of his deal next season and obviously just coming off a Super Bowl victory, there is no doubt that an extension is going to get done to not only keep Sirianni in Philadelphia for the long term, but to also give him a massive pay raise. As Sirianni's current deal is paying him about $7 million per season, which is kind of on the lower end, especially for a coach as successful as he has been. But NFL insider Tom Pelissero has said that he expects Nick's new deal to be valued at around $15 to $16 million annually, which would put him in the upper echelon of head coaches in terms of salary. And there's no denying that the guy deserves it. I mean, again, he has 4 playoff appearances in 4 years, 2 Super Bowl appearances, and a Super Bowl victory. And he's also obviously off to a straight-up historic start to his head coaching career. So shout out to Nick, and I hope he gets the best extension possible, especially since head coaches' salaries do not count towards the salary cap. But speaking of guys that have had historic starts to their career, we switch our focus to quarterback Jalen Hurts, who still, even after winning the Super Bowl and Super Bowl MVP, is just continuing to be hated on and disrespected. I mean, let me tell you, some of the stuff that I've seen is just absolutely ridiculous. I mean, from people continuing to put less proven and less successful quarterbacks over Hurts, such as Justin Herbert, Jaden Daniels, Trevor Lawrence, and even Geno Smith, among others, to people now trying to discredit Super Bowl wins and act like that doesn't even matter when evaluating a quarterback. I feel like I've seen it all at this point with the lengths that people are going to try and discredit Hurts, but that just shows me that these people simply cannot accept reality, and the reality is that not only is Jalen Hurts a Super Bowl champion and Super Bowl MVP, but he's also off to a historic start to his career, and he is one of the best quarterbacks in the game today. Plus, when you put his career playoff stats next to some of the other elite quarterbacks in the game like Lamar Jackson, Joe Burrow, and Justin Herbert that people always want to say are so much better than Jalen Hurts, Hurts' numbers and success are clearly far superior when you look at them side by side. So the haters can say whatever they want, but for the people that actually know what they're talking about, they know that Jalen Hurts is one of the best quarterbacks in the entire NFL, and there's nothing that anybody can do about it. And now, as of today, Hurts and the Eagles finally know who their offensive coordinator will be for the 2025 season, as it was just announced that the Birds have officially named now former pass game coordinator and associate head coach Kevin Patullo as their new OC. And this is a move that I think we all saw coming, as ever since we figured out that Kellen Moore would be leaving for New Orleans, Patullo was really the only name that was thrown around to be his replacement, and now it's official. Now, personally, I'm not going to say that I'm thrilled with the hire, but I'm also not going to freak out over it, because as I've talked about in previous videos, I feel like there are reasons to be both optimistic and also somewhat skeptical of Patullo, as on one hand, I don't think it's fair to say that this is going to be a complete repeat of what happened with Brian Johnson in 2023, as unlike BJ, Patullo has a ton of NFL coaching experience, as he's coached in the league for 15 years with 6 different teams and has been in a lot of different roles and positions. So even though he has been Nick Sirianni's right-hand man for the last 4 years, it's not like he's just a product of Sirianni, if you get what I'm saying. Unfortunately, Patullo has also been able to work with all the Eagles OCs over the last 4 years, including Shane Steichen and Kellen Moore, and he has no doubt learned a lot from them and also has taken concepts from them as well. Plus, this past year with Moore, Patullo was the guy largely in charge of combining the two offenses, so that's definitely all very positive. That said, I'm not really the biggest fan of promoting from within, as there will be a lack of new ideas coming in, and it just hasn't worked out so well for the Eagles the last few times that they've done it at the offensive coordinator position. Plus, I absolutely hate the fact that he doesn't have any play calling experience, and also the fact that he's so close with Sirianni does at least give me some worry that the offense could get a little bit more stale than it was under Kellen Moore this year, but we'll just have to wait and see how it goes. I'm going to give him a chance before I criticize him too heavily, and hopefully it all works out. But I'm curious to hear your guys' thoughts down in the comments below, and also, you guys already know that I'm going to be continuing to cover all the Eagles news throughout this entire offseason, so if you don't want to miss any of that, then make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications, and also drop a like to show some support if you did enjoy this video. It really does help me out a ton, and it takes 2 seconds. I would really greatly appreciate it, so let's see if we can get to 600 likes today, and also leave a comment down below just regarding anything that I talked about in this video. And if you want to watch another Eagles video going over some stuff from earlier in the week, you can check this out right here. And now with all that being said, that's pretty much all I got for this one, guys. So thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.